Have you ever looked at someone you once couldn't imagine living without and felt nothing? Not anger, not sadness, just a strange, hollow silence where love used to live? It's one of the most disorienting experiences a human being can face, because we're conditioned to believe that if we loved deeply enough, it should last forever. But what if I told you that some relationships were never meant to be permanent? What if certain people enter our lives not to stay, but to teach us something essential about ourselves, and then leave? Carl Jung believed that we don't meet anyone by accident. Every significant relationship we enter is a soul contract, an unconscious agreement between two people to mirror each other's wounds, awaken each other's potential, and ultimately help each other evolve. But here's what most people don't realize. Soul contracts have expiration dates, and when that contract is complete, when the lesson has been learned and the transformation has occurred, the relationship begins to dissolve. Not because anyone failed, not because love wasn't real, but because the soul recognizes that its work here is done. The problem is, most of us don't know how to read the signs. We stay in relationships long after the soul contract has expired, clinging to what was, hoping it will return, refusing to accept that something fundamental has shifted. We blame ourselves. We wonder what we did wrong. We try harder, love louder, give more, but nothing changes. And deep down, beneath all the effort and confusion, there's a whisper we're afraid to hear. This is over, and it's okay. Jung spoke about the individuation process, the lifelong journey of becoming who we truly are. And sometimes, that journey requires us to release people we thought would walk beside us forever. It's not a failure of love. It's an evolution of the soul. The relationship served its purpose. It taught you what you needed to learn. It reflected back the parts of yourself you couldn't see. It cracked you open so something new could emerge. And now, it's asking you to let go. But how do you know? How do you distinguish between a rough patch that requires commitment and a soul contract that's genuinely complete? That's what we're going to explore together today. The 7 signs that a soul contract is ending. Not to frighten you, but to free you. Because recognizing the end of a contract isn't about giving up on love. It's about honoring the truth of your own evolution. Before we go deeper, I want you to pause for just a moment and ask yourself this. Is there someone in your life right now who you're holding on to, even though something inside you knows the connection has changed? Someone you loved, maybe still love, but the energy between you feels different? If that question stirred something in you, leave a comment below. Just one word that describes what you're feeling right now. Let's create space for this together. Now let's begin with the first sign. The first sign that a soul contract is ending is the disappearance of emotional resonance. You're still physically together, maybe even going through the motions of affection, but when you look into their eyes, you don't feel seen anymore. When you speak, your words seem to dissolve into the air between you, landing nowhere. There's no friction, no spark, no heat, but there's also no warmth. Just a kind of emotional flatness, like two people standing on opposite sides of a thick glass wall, visible to each other but unable to truly connect. Jung would call this the withdrawal of projection. In the beginning of a relationship, we project onto the other person qualities we haven't yet integrated within ourselves. We see them as the embodiment of our anima or animus, the inner feminine or masculine that completes us. They become the container for our unlived potential, our unexpressed desires, our hidden wounds. And in that projection, we feel alive, magnetized, utterly consumed by the connection. But projection, by its very nature, is temporary. As we grow, as we integrate those qualities within ourselves, the projection fades. We start to see the person as they actually are, not as the symbol we needed them to be. And sometimes, when the projection dissolves, we discover that there's not much underneath. The person we fell in love with was, in part, a reflection of our own inner work. And now that the work is done, the reflection is no longer necessary. This doesn't make the love any less real. It just means the love was serving a specific purpose in your psychological development. You needed them to show you something about yourself. You needed them to activate a part of you that was dormant. You needed them to reflect back the aspects of your soul you couldn't yet access alone. And they did. Beautifully. Completely. But now the mirror has fulfilled its purpose. When emotional resonance disappears, conversations become transactional. You talk about logistics, schedules, responsibilities, but never about dreams, fears, or the deeper currents of your inner life. You stop sharing the parts of yourself that matter most because somewhere along the way, you stopped feeling like they could hold those parts. And maybe they feel the same about you. There's no blame here, no villain in this story. Just two souls who met to teach each other something essential, and now the lesson is complete. You might find yourself wondering when exactly it happened. When did the connection go quiet? When did their presence stop feeling like home? There's rarely a single moment you can point to. It's more like a slow fade, a gradual dimming of the light that once illuminated everything between you. And one day, you wake up and realize you've been living in the dark for longer than you care to admit, too afraid to turn on the lights and see what's really there. This is the first sign, the silence where resonance used to be. The second sign that a soul contract is ending is the emergence of parallel lives. You're technically in the same relationship, sleeping in the same bed, sharing the same space, but you're living in two completely different worlds. Your interests diverge. Your values shift. Your visions for the future no longer align. What excites you bores them. What matters to them feels irrelevant to you, and slowly, imperceptibly, you become strangers who happen to share a life. Jung understood that individuation, the process of becoming fully yourself, sometimes requires separation. Not always physical separation, but psychological separation, the necessary distance that allows each person to discover who they are outside the context of the relationship. In healthy partnerships, both people individuate together, supporting each other's growth while maintaining connection. But in soul contracts that are ending, individuation pulls people in opposite directions. The paths that once converged now diverge, and trying to force them back together only creates friction and resentment. You start making decisions without consulting them, not out of disrespect, but because their input no longer feels relevant to the life you're building. You pursue hobbies, friendships, and experiences that don't include them. You daydream about a future where they're not present, and it doesn't fill you with guilt the way it once might have. You're not actively planning to leave, but you're no longer actively planning to stay either. You exist in a strange liminal space, neither fully committed nor fully detached, waiting for something to shift, for clarity to arrive, for permission to acknowledge what your soul already knows. This parallel existence can go on for years. Months turn into seasons, seasons into years, and you look around one day to realize you've built an entire life that doesn't include them in any meaningful way. You have your friends, they have theirs. You have your routines, they have theirs. You occupy the same physical space but inhabit completely different emotional universes. And the saddest part is, sometimes neither of you says anything. You both feel it, but you're too afraid to name it, as if speaking it aloud will make it real in a way that silence somehow prevents. But Jung reminds us that what we refuse to acknowledge consciously will manifest unconsciously. The unexpressed truth will leak out in passive aggression, in emotional withdrawal, in the small daily resentments that accumulate like dust on a surface you've stopped cleaning. The soul knows when a contract is complete, and it will not be silenced forever. It will find ways to speak, to push, to create enough discomfort that you're finally forced to listen. When you realize you're living parallel lives, when your inner world and their inner world no longer intersect, when you can spend an entire evening together and still feel profoundly alone, that's not a sign you need to try harder. That's a sign the contract is complete. The relationship served its purpose, and now it's asking you to honor that completion by releasing what no longer serves your evolution. The third sign that a soul contract is ending is the exhaustion of trying. You've done the therapy, read the books, had the difficult conversations, made the compromises, and yet nothing fundamentally changes. There's a weariness that settles into your bones, a kind of soul fatigue that has nothing to do with laziness and everything to do with trying to force something that's naturally dissolving. You're not giving up because you're weak. You're exhausted because you're fighting against the natural flow of your own evolution. Jung spoke about the principle of enantiodromia, the idea that everything eventually transforms into its opposite. Relationships that once energized us can become draining. Connections that once felt effortless can become laborious. And when we find ourselves in that space, constantly working to maintain something that used to sustain itself, we have to ask an uncomfortable question. Are we nurturing growth, or are we resisting an ending? There's a difference between the difficult work of maintaining a healthy relationship and the futile work of keeping a dead relationship on life support. Healthy relationships require effort, communication, vulnerability, and compromise. But they also have periods of ease, moments where connection flows naturally, where you remember why you chose each other in the first place. When a soul contract is ending, those moments disappear. Every interaction feels like an uphill battle. Every conversation requires emotional labor you no longer have the capacity to give. You're not just tired, you're depleted. And here's what makes it so painful. You still care. That's the cruel irony of soul contracts ending. The love doesn't always disappear immediately. You might still feel affection, gratitude, even tenderness toward them. But the energy that once sustained the relationship has evaporated, and no amount of willpower can resurrect it. You're trying to revive something whose time has passed, and deep down, you know it. But admitting that feels like failure, like betrayal, like evidence that you didn't love enough or try hard enough or believe enough in what you once had. So you keep trying. You initiate another conversation, plan another date, make another promise to be better, to show up differently, to finally fix whatever's broken. But each attempt leaves you more exhausted than the last, because you're not fixing something broken. You're resisting something complete. The contract fulfilled its purpose. The lessons were learned, the growth happened, and now the relationship is asking you to honor that completion by letting it go. I want you to think about this. What would it feel like to stop trying so hard? What if the exhaustion you feel isn't a sign of your inadequacy, but your soul's way of telling you it's time to rest? If that question touches something tender in you, drop a comment with the word rest, so I know you're here, listening, feeling this with me. The exhaustion is real, and it's not your fault. It's the natural response to swimming against the current of your own evolution. The fourth sign that a soul contract is ending is the absence of growth. In the beginning, the relationship stretched you. It challenged your assumptions, pushed you beyond your comfort zone, invited you to become a version of yourself you didn't know existed. But now, the relationship feels stagnant, like a pool of water that stopped flowing. You're not becoming more of who you are. You're becoming less. You're shrinking to fit, dimming your light to keep the peace, suppressing the parts of yourself that no longer align with who they need you to be. Jung believed that the purpose of every significant relationship is to facilitate the individuation process, to help us become more fully ourselves. When a relationship supports this process, both people evolve together, each becoming more authentic, more integrated, more whole. But when a soul contract is ending, the relationship begins to hinder individuation. Instead of supporting your growth, it starts to constrain it. Instead of celebrating your evolution, it resists it. And you find yourself caught between loyalty to the relationship and loyalty to your own becoming. This creates an unbearable internal conflict. You love this person. You've built a life with them. You've made promises and commitments you don't take lightly. But your soul is calling you towards something they can no longer be part of. Your values are shifting. Your priorities are changing. The person you're becoming doesn't fit inside the relationship you're in. And the more you try to reconcile these two realities, the more fragmented you feel. You start to notice that you're different when you're away from them. When you're with friends pursuing your passions, or simply alone, you feel more alive, more like yourself. But when you come home, you feel the need to contract, to edit, to present a version of yourself that's more palatable, more familiar, more aligned with who you used to be. It's exhausting, this constant shape-shifting, this perpetual self-betrayal, and yet you do it because you don't know how to honor both the relationship and your own evolution at the same time. But here's what Jung understood. You can't betray yourself in service of a relationship and call it love. True love, authentic connection, doesn't require you to abandon your becoming. It celebrates it, nurtures it, creates space for it. When a relationship demands that you stop growing, that you stay small, that you remain the person you were, rather than becoming the person you're meant to be, the relationship isn't serving love anymore. It's serving fear. Fear of change, fear of loss, fear of the unknown. The absence of growth isn't always dramatic. It's subtle. It's the slow suffocation of your potential, the gradual erosion of your authenticity, the quiet resignation that this is as good as it gets. And your soul, that deepest part of you that knows who you truly are, will not accept that. It will push and push and push until you finally listen. When growth stops, the contract is ending. Your soul is ready for the next chapter. even if your heart isn't ready to let go. The fifth sign that a soul contract is ending is the persistent fantasy of another life. You find yourself daydreaming about what your life would look like without them. Not out of malice, not because you hate them, but because somewhere deep inside, you're preparing for a future they're not part of. You imagine living alone and feeling relieved. You imagine meeting someone new and feeling excited again. You imagine pursuing opportunities that would require leaving, and instead of fear, you feel possibility. Jung spoke about the shadow, the parts of ourselves we repress because they don't fit the image we've constructed. And sometimes the fantasy of another life is the shadow speaking, trying to tell you something you're afraid to acknowledge consciously. It's your psyche's way of rehearsing an ending, of acclimating you to a reality you're not yet ready to face directly. These fantasies aren't distractions from your relationship, they're messages from your soul, breadcrumbs leading you toward your truth. At first, you might dismiss these thoughts as normal, as harmless wanderings of an active imagination. Everyone fantasizes sometimes, right? But then the fantasies become more frequent, more vivid, more emotionally charged. You don't just imagine leaving, you feel what it would be like. The relief, the freedom, the lightness of no longer carrying the weight of a relationship that's expired. And when you return from these mental journeys, coming back to your actual life feels like putting on clothes that no longer fit, confining and uncomfortable. The guilt arrives shortly after. How can you be thinking these things? How can you be imagining a life without them when they've done nothing explicitly wrong? They haven't betrayed you, haven't abused you, haven't given you a legitimate reason to leave. They're a good person. You have history together. You've built a life. And yet none of that changes the fact that when you close your eyes and imagine your future, they're not in it. Or if they are, they're a faded presence, a background character in a story where you've become the protagonist again. This is one of the most confusing aspects of soul contracts ending. There's no dramatic betrayal to point to, no obvious reason to justify leaving. The relationship isn't bad. It's just over. The contract is complete. The lessons have been learned. The growth has happened. And now, your soul is ready for what comes next, even if your logical mind hasn't caught up yet. So it speaks to you in fantasies, in daydreams, in the quiet moments when your defenses are down and your truth can finally surface. Here's what I want you to consider. If you could design your ideal life without any guilt, without having to justify it to anyone, what would it look like? Who would be in it? And more importantly, who wouldn't? If that question makes your heart race, even a little, comment below with just one word: freedom. Let's acknowledge what your soul is trying to tell you. The fantasies aren't a betrayal, they're a revelation. The sixth sign that a soul contract is ending is the feeling of being fundamentally misunderstood. No matter how clearly you express yourself, no matter how vulnerable you become, no matter how many different ways you try to communicate your inner world, they just don't get you anymore. And perhaps more importantly, you don't get them. There's a disconnect so profound that you begin to wonder if you ever truly knew each other at all, or if you were only in love with the projections you created, the versions of each other you needed in order to learn what you came together to learn. Jung emphasized that true intimacy requires us to see and be seen as we actually are, not as we wish to be or fear we are. In the beginning of a relationship, there's often a beautiful illusion of perfect understanding. We finish each other's sentences, anticipate each other's needs, feel like we've finally found someone who truly sees us. But this isn't always real understanding. It's often projection, idealization, the merging that happens before two separate selves have fully formed. As we individuate, as we become more of who we actually are, the gap between our authentic self and the person our partner knows begins to widen. We change, we evolve, we discover aspects of ourselves we didn't know existed. And if our partner isn't growing in parallel ways, if they're still attached to the version of us we used to be, they can't hold the complexity of who we're becoming. We try to share our new insights, our shifting beliefs, our emerging dreams, and we're met with confusion, resistance, or worse, indifference. This creates a profound loneliness, the kind that's somehow worse than being alone. To be physically present with someone and yet feel utterly invisible, utterly unknown, utterly misunderstood, it's a special kind of heartbreak. You're sharing a life but not sharing a reality. You're speaking but not being heard. You're showing them who you are, and they're looking right through you, still seeing only who you were. And the saddest part is, it often goes both ways. Just as they can't see you, you realize you can't really see them either. Whatever deep knowing existed between you has dissolved. You're two strangers who know each other's habits but not each other's souls. You know what they eat for breakfast, but not what keeps them awake at night. You know their daily routine but not their deepest fears or their most authentic desires. The contract brought you together to mirror each other at a specific stage of development, but that stage is past, and without it, there's not enough foundation for the relationship to continue. The feeling of being misunderstood isn't something you can fix with better communication skills or more intentional conversations. It's not a problem to be solved. It's a signal to be heard. When the fundamental resonance between two souls dissolves, when you can no longer find each other across the distance, the contract is complete. Your paths are diverging, and that's okay. The seventh and final sign that a soul contract is ending is the arrival of peace with the idea of ending. For months, maybe years, the thought of leaving filled you with panic, guilt, or overwhelming sadness. But then, something shifts. You think about the relationship ending, and instead of fear, you feel calm. A quiet, deep, almost inexplicable sense of rightness settles over you. It's not that you want them to suffer or that you've stopped caring. It's that your soul recognizes the completion of the contract, and with that recognition comes a strange, profound peace. Jung called this integration, the moment when what we've been resisting finally becomes conscious, and in that consciousness, we find acceptance. The internal war ends. We stop fighting against reality. We stop trying to resurrect what's already died. We stop blaming ourselves for not being able to force something to work that was never meant to be permanent. And in that surrender, there's a kind of grace, a release, a gentle exhale after holding your breath for far too long. This peace doesn't mean the ending will be easy. There will still be grief, logistical complications, difficult conversations, and moments of doubt. But beneath all of that, there's a foundation of knowing, an unshakable certainty that this is the right path, even if it's the harder one. You're not leaving because you're running away from difficulty. You're leaving because you're honoring the truth of your own evolution, respecting the wisdom of your soul, and trusting that whatever comes next is part of your larger journey. Soul contracts are sacred. They're not failures when they end. They're completions. Every person who enters your life at a soul level is there to teach you something essential about yourself, to reflect back the parts of you that need healing, integration, or awakening. And when that work is done, when the lessons have been learned and the transformation has occurred, the contract naturally dissolves. Holding on beyond that point isn't loyalty, it's resistance to your own becoming. If you've recognized yourself in these 7 signs, if something in you has been whispering that a contract is complete, I want you to know, you're not broken, you're not failing, and you're not alone. You're evolving, and evolution sometimes requires release. It requires honoring what was while also embracing what's calling you forward. That takes tremendous courage, and I see you for having it. Before you go, I'd love to hear from you. Which of these 7 signs resonated most deeply? What part of this felt like it was speaking directly to your soul? Leave a comment below and share your reflection. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if this video brought you clarity, comfort, or simply made you feel less alone, please subscribe to the channel and share this with someone who might need it. Your support helps us create more content like this, and I'm genuinely grateful you're here. Thank you for trusting me with your time and your heart today. I'm honored to walk this path with you, wherever it leads. Until next time, be gentle with yourself.